Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee on Thursday, the 20th of May. This meeting has been live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. I also agree to members' remote participation in the meeting today. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when they're not addressing the meeting, switching off mobile phones or placing them on airplane mode. Should any member wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you'll be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time where you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you return. This will allow us to monitor members' presence. I have 3 additional items I'd like to bring to members' attention today before we go into the formal part of the meeting. First is that yesterday the applicant withdrew agenda item number 5, which is Aldernuke Fishery at Terregles. So the Planning Applications Committee will not be considering agenda item 5 today. It has been formally withdrawn. There are 2 items I'd like officers to address for us, either today or with a round of emails bringing members up to date with where we are. The first is an outstanding site visit. Given that the government guidance has changed, I'd like David or Tracy to bring members up to speed with when we might be able to carry out this site visit to allow that particular plan application to be determined. And secondly, members will know that the next full council meeting will be a hybrid version where some members will be able to attend meetings in person with officers present. So it would appear that if we're moving towards that arrangement, that at some stage in the near future, the Planning Applications Committee will have the same arrangement in place where there'll be an opportunity for committee members to attend in person should they choose to do so. So either Governance Tracy or Mr. City, can you advise members on where we are with the site visit and the hybrid meetings, please?
Morning, Chair. Morning, members. Yes, there's still one outstanding site visit. Dates back to, I think, about January to Terregles. Tracy and myself have been in communication with the relevant section of the council. They want a bit more information as to exactly what would this involve, but rest assured we will try and get a meeting arranged as soon as we are legally allowed to do so. In terms of the hybrid meetings, I don't have any further information on that myself. Tracy may be able to give some more details. I would assume it's probably going to kick in after the summer recess. There's no Planning Applications Committee in July, so I would imagine it would be the August meeting onwards probably, but I'm more than happy to attend at the physical meeting because I think that actually helps in terms of having the lead officer present.
That's right, David, thank you. And if Tracy doesn't have that information to hand, if she could maybe just circulate members when that information becomes available, I think members would appreciate that. It would just give them time to prepare in case they do choose to attend in person. So Tracy, if you don't if you do not have any information to hand, can you maybe make inquiries and circulate that information to all Planning Application Committee members, please?
Yes, Chair. I know there was an email circulated about full council to members giving an update, so I believe there'll be work ongoing over the recess, and then hopefully the hybrid meetings will commence in late August once recess is complete.
Thank you very much, Tracy. The only other item I have, members, is that Councillor Karen Carruthers intended to be here in person and speak to agenda item 9 and agenda item 10, She's no longer able to do so, but I have agreed that Tracy will read out a short statement on her behalf or when we come to agenda item 9 and agenda item 10. On that basis, members, we move on to the papers itself. Do we have any declarations of interest from any member?
Chair, can I just confirm the adherent first, please?
Yes, indeed you can, Tracy. My apologies. Sedran, and apologies, please. And I've already agreed to the remote participation for members.
We've currently got 18 members present, Chair. Not present at the meeting is Councillor McKee, Councillor Martin and Councillor Sloan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and apologies for that. So, Sedran, it's been done. I now have 3 speakers, or 4. I've got Archie Dryborough, John Campbell, Henry McClelland and Andy Ferguson in that order. Archie, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's on item number 4. I'm not declaring an interest. I'll just advise people that one of the objectors did discuss this application with me, but I feel that I'm able to sit in and make a decision on this particular one.
Thanks, Archie. Councillor Campbell, John.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, agenda item number 6. I know one of the objectors. No discussion is taking place. I'm happy to stay at the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks very much, John. Councillor McClelland, Henry.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. It's agenda item 4. Obviously, living in Annan, I pretty much know everyone. So I know the applicant, the agent and the objectors. But again, I feel that just knowing the people's not enough to actually declare an interest, and I will remain in the meeting for the appropriate discussions and decisions.
Much appreciated, Henry. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, Andy.
Good morning, Chair Jim. It's again, it's item 6. One of the objectors is an acquaintance of mine, but I've had no conversation and no details or any discussions with him at all in this, so I'm happy to stay at the meeting, but I'm just declaring interest that I know one of the objectors.
Thanks very much, Andy. I've now got another 3 speakers. I've got Jeff Lever, John Young and then Ian Carruthers. So Councillor Lever, Jeff, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's agenda item 11. I've had a look at the code of conduct for councillors. Obviously, the applicant is the leader of the Tory group. Should we all declare an interest in that case, since we know the applicant? I mean, I know the applicant, I haven't discussed it with him, so I'm happy to declare an interest, but to stay in the meeting.
Thanks, Jeff.
So you have governance advice on that?
Yeah, well, I think though it would be wrong just to not participate because you happen to know someone, even if you know that person personally. But Tracy, can you offer governance advice to all members, please, given that agenda item 11 is a direct application from an elected member of the Galloway Council?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Obviously, it's for members to come up to their own conclusion on declaration of interest, but yes, members can declare that they are aware of the applicant, but this is an application from Mr. Ian Carruthers, not Councillor Ian Carruthers. So that would be my advice, that you can declare that you know the applicant, and if there's been no discussion or involvement around the application, then councillors can remain.
Okay, Tracy, well, I take it then, without going through every member personally, there is an acknowledgement that every member in the Fleece and Galloway Council will be aware of the role that Councillor Ian Carruthers plays within the council. If any individual member wants to make a statement, I'll be happy to accept that. I'll come to Councillor John Young. John, please.
Thanks, Chair. Once, as with other councillors, I know the objectors in agenda item 6 have been in the property, and I actually think I should withdraw from any discussion on this item.
That's much appreciated. Thank you, John. So, Tracy, you'll note that Councillor John Young will leave the meeting on agenda item 6. Councillor Carruthers, Ian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just as per what Councillor Lever has already pointed out, item number 11, I am the applicant and I will leave the meeting, Chair, and it's as per paragraph 1.1 as outlined within the report.
Thank you. If there are no other members wishing to make a declaration, I will assume that all declarations have been made and noted by governance, in which case we move on to the minute of the meeting of the 14th of April 2021 for approval. That's on there as agenda item 3. Do any members have any observations on the minute, or are we happy to accept that as a true record?
Happy to accept, yep.
Thanks, Archie. If there are no other observations, I'll take it that's as read that it's a true record, in which case move on to agenda item number 4. Well, before we do that though, we now have the governance statement. Tracy, can you read out the statement and the procedure to be followed today, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the meeting after making their presentation, then applicants or their agents. In line with the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020 Schedule 6, Part 4, covering the exclusion of the public from meetings of local authorities, representatives were offered the option of joining the meeting remotely to deliver their presentation or to provide a written statement to be read out on their behalf. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments by which their very nature are more complex, and the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the committee is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Okay, members, we now move on to agenda item 4. This is an application for the erection of detached dwelling house and detached garage, formation of access and installation of treatment plant and soakaway at site next to Sluchcairn Cottage, back of the hill, Annan. The application type's a full application. The recommendation is to refuse. The reference number is 21/0225/full, and the case officer is Carla Livingston. Carla, if you're with us, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. Okay, the first slide shows the position of the application site within the back of the hill, which is a small building group between Annan and the Solway Firth. Next slide, please. This slide shows the block plan, which shows the position of the application site forward of Sluchcairn. Meadowbank forms the garden ground of Meadowbank forms the boundary of the site to the northwest. Next slide, please. The ground floor plan shows a relatively open layout. Next slide, please. The first floor plan shows the position of the bedrooms, and you can see a central window at the top there, which serves a hallway. Next slide, please. This shows the elevations of the proposed dwelling house. The northwest elevation is the front elevation, that's the top left, and that faces Meadowbank. The southwest elevation, the bottom left, that faces Slough Cairn, and the bottom right elevation is the rear elevation that faces the Solway Firth. Next slide, please. This shows the existing field access to the application site. The timber you can see that's to the left-hand side of the timber gates and stone wall, which forms the boundary of Slough Cairn. Next slide, please. Panning to the right, you're looking down the back of the hill. This road, there's a residential street that continues on towards the Solway Firth. Next slide, please. Looking up the hill, this road continues on towards Elm Road in the direction of Annan. Next slide, please. This shows this is looking southeast within the application site, looking towards the Solway Firth. You can see Slough Cairn and its boundary fence on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. This is looking northwest towards Meadowbank, and you can see the dormer window of Meadowbank to the right-hand side of the tree. Next slide, please. This is panning slightly left, and you can see the field access to the site, and one Annan Hill is just beyond that across the road. Next slide, please. This is looking west towards Slough Cairn. You can get I hope you can get an idea of the variance in ground level within the application site. Here you can see the ground level within the application site is lower than Slough Cairn. Next slide, please. And this is looking eastwards towards the agricultural fields that bound the site to the east. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carla. Do any members have any questions for the case officer? It doesn't appear so. Henry McClellan. Henry, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was struggling to unmute that there. Carla, I was just wondering, are there any sectional drawings that show the section through the full site and the adjacent properties to give an indication of height and views, window to window, etc.?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't include that in my presentation. There is a sectional drawing that I didn't include in my presentation, which shows the existing and proposed ground levels.
I would think that's fairly critical in terms of allowing us to make our decision.
Can you source that, Carla? I see Councillor Carruthers looking to speak. Is that something you can access and present to members today, Carla?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a way that I have access to it. I don't know how I can show it to you. Is there a way to send it to Teams to show it to you?
Oh, I'll let you speak to Tracy with that. And Henry, if you don't mind, I'll bring in Councillor Carruthers and I'll come back to you and Carla to see if there's some way that can be facilitated. Ian Carruthers, please.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my question was for Carla as well. I was looking at paragraph 1.5 of the planning history. And if I'm correct, Chair, it looks like there's a current permission on here. I was trying to understand the size and scale of the building that already has a permission on it. I don't see that level of information. Just as a starter, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. I understand there's planning permission in principle, so there's a policy decision that a house could be built there, and it's simply whether or no the current design satisfies planning officers or elected members, and clearly that doesn't satisfy our planning officer at this moment in time. Coming back to Councillor McClelland.
Chair, my question was...
Pardon?
Chair, apologies, Chair, for talking over you, but my question was pointed at the case officer, not yourself.
What was your question again?
there's planning. It looks like there's an extant permission on here, and I would imagine as part of that proposal, planning principle or otherwise, Chair, I would argue that there was actually indications to the size and scale of the house, and type and scale and character and all the rest that I would imagine that would be presented. I haven't actually seen that, but if that was the case, if it wasn't the case, I'll be wrong. Happy to be wrong, Chair, but if it was presented, I'd like to understand what could potentially be built out there under what used to be classed as reserve matter.
Well, planning principles are always then dependent upon the size and scale presented in the case officer's view on it.
It's okay. The question was posed to the case officer, Chair, rather than yourself.
Yeah, but I'll decide who speaks, Ian, and I don't think the case officer's view will be any different from mine. Carla, do you want to respond to Councillor Throthers, please?
Yeah, the planning history on the application site dates back from the 1990s, and each time it was an outline planning. It was an outline planning permission, and then planning permission in principle. And in those instances, for planning permission in principle, it establishes the principle of the erection of a dwelling house there. It doesn't include plans and elevations, and we wouldn't expect that at that stage. I think in the past maybe there have been indicative layouts submitted. I think in the previous applications from the 1990s there was, and after that, I think I state in my planning history that in 2008 there was the caveat that the proposed dwelling house should be 27 metres from the boundary of the application site.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you, Carla. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
So, Carla, to go back to the question from Councillor McClelland, is there any way that can be shared?
Yes, I think
Is it on the Teams chat? If everybody on Teams chat, David City has presented the ground levels in the Teams chat.
Thank you, David.
Henry, does that meet your requirements? Jane Maitland seems to wonder exactly what it represents, the chat on the Teams chat. David, can you maybe speak to it, please, or Carla?
Hello, Chair.
Yes, Chair, sorry. That just shows the levels across the site. So it's showing, for example, on the far left-hand side, coming off the road, your level above ordnance datum there is 26.676 metres. And as you can see, the bottom corner of the site drops down to it's about 22 metres. So there's a clear drop of about 4 metres across the site. You take a section from the northwest corner down to the southeast corner. So what those are is just spot heights for the ground levels.
Thanks, David. Hope that. So Jane and Henry had to leave, or maybe he lost his connection. I'm hoping he will have returned now. Henry, are you with us?
Yes, I'm there. I don't know what happened there, Chair. The connection was lost momentarily. Yeah, I appreciate that that shows the existing levels in the survey of the plot, but that wasn't specifically what I was asking for. I was asking if there was an available cross-section through the site that showed the surrounding properties, and in particular the property to the north. I actually thought that was a standard requirement that would be expected in a planning application. I've probably produced dozens and dozens of these in my previous life, so I fully expected that would be readily available, and I actually think it's critical to this type of proposal, because that slide there that David shared with us, that Mr. Sutty shared with us, that shows the extent of the drop on the plot. And what I was looking for to see as a pickup from the report that the applicant has amended drawings to reduce the height of the proposal. And what I wanted to try and envisage, and the help of a sectional drawing would have let me see what that was in terms of the height of the ridge of the proposal compared to the adjacent property, because I think that's absolutely key, including distances from those adjacent properties. So it only partially, and it's very partially, assists. It's not what I was looking for, Chair.
Okay, David, now that you understand exactly what Henry's looking for, is there any way that can be provided today?
There is a sectional.
I've dropped in the section, Chair, that to the Teams chat. That is all I can find online. There doesn't appear to be any drawings I can see that show sections of the property in relation to existing buildings that run sections right through those.
Okay, and Carla did start to make some observation. Carla, you anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to say that there is a sectional drawing, but it just shows a cut through the site, running from like effectively north to south.
Okay, so it would seem that, well, if we don't have enough information to allow members to make an informed judgment today, there's obviously the option to defer for further information, although we'd have to be clear exactly what it was we're looking for and why. I've got Councillor Dryborough coming in. We've still got to go through the process anyway, and in session before we do such a thing, we're only questions for the case officer, but to Archie, please.
Yeah, it's on the same point here. I mean, who's responsible for actually putting them? Is it the applicant or is it the council? Because I think it's the applicant's responsibility to show that as opposed to the council.
And that's fine. If the applicants fail to do that, we'll go back and ask the applicant to do that work for us if that's what members want. But we're still at the questions for case officer. So Henry's question's hanging at the moment. David or Carla, do you know whose responsibility it is to provide information such as sectional drawings and relationships to adjoining plots?
That would be the agent or the applicant.
And should we be requesting that, or is that expected as a matter of course?
We're entitled to ask for that information if we consider it is necessary to be able to determine the application. Certainly a number of amended drawings were sought with this particular application, but given the combination of the site visit and the sections across the site, there is another plan which shows the layout. It doesn't provide what Councillor McClelland is clearly looking for. So I can only advise if members are absolutely certain that this information is critical for them to make a competent decision, then your only option in due course would be to request a deferral for that information to be provided. But the information is, as with all these applications, the presentation don't include absolutely everything, otherwise we'd be here all day. But members should obviously be aware at the end of every report there's a link to the e-planning website, which includes all the documents and all the plans that have been submitted.
Okay, I've got Jane Maitland, please, and any Carruthers.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. All I was going to say is perhaps if we moved on and looked at the images submitted in support of the representation submitted by Mr. Richardson, members might find that helpful. Although I do accept it's been submitted by an objector rather than a supporter.
Yeah, we'll go to that stage anyway, because we can't make a deferral until we go into session, I don't think, and we would want to do that anyway. So we're still at questions for the case officers, not a debate, Councillor Carruthers. That will come when we're in session.
I'll wait till session, Chair, thanks.
Thank you. So are there any further questions for the case officer? If not, we'll go to the representations. We have Catherine Richardson and Keith Richardson, who are not able to attend, but Tracy will read out a statement on behalf of both of them. So you get two individual statements, and then we'll come to the agent after that. So Tracy, can you read out the two statements, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. The first statement is from Catherine Richardson. I would first like to say that the comments and the support and information submitted on the 19th of April in response to the valid objections to the proposed development at the back of the hill were mostly incorrect and came over as very condescending. Whilst I am only going to address the two most important issues to us at Meadowbank, it needs to be noted that we do not object and have never objected to a development on the site, only the size and design of this one. It is not in keeping with the scale, character or appearance of dwellings within the immediate neighbourhood. Our first concern is that the scale and position of this proposed development creates a major loss of privacy for Meadowbank. It makes no difference that the glazed gable is over a stair landing. Along with several other windows, it still overlooks our property and those of our neighbours. This can be more easily visualised by looking at the sketch illustrations produced to you to give you an idea of its potential impact. See the attached Item 3 sketch presented looking from south of Meadowbank and attachment 4 looking east from the road. In accordance with the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan LDP2 under OP1 development considerations, development proposals should be compatible with the character and amenity of the area and should not conflict with nearby land uses. The potential loss of privacy on nearby properties should be a material consideration in the assessment of this proposal. Our second concern is for the protection of our beech tree on the south boundary of our property. This was an initial suggestion that this tree was unsafe, and subsequently supported information from the agent to the planners stated that the tree was unhealthy and rotten. This is untrue. We too have had a tree surgeon examine the tree, and although the roots are a little exposed on the south side, it is healthy, sound and in very good condition. At over 120 years old, it is classed as a veteran tree, and as such the Council will ensure that the protection of veteran trees are given high priority. LDP2 NE8 trees and development. Its removal would certainly be to the detriment of wildlife. We feel it should be protected during any subsequent development, as proposals should respect, protect and enhance the region's rich and distinct biodiversity. LDP2 OP1D. Trees enhance the local character and are consistently associated with attractive and popular neighbourhoods. Our tree is certainly attractive and is an asset to the area. It also acts as a windbreaker, as did our boundary hedge, which has already been removed without consultation. We are assuming that this will be replaced in due course. I would have thought that a nature enthusiast would have understood the importance of retaining established hedges within the natural environment rather than destroying them. Thank you for considering my response. Statement is from Keith Richardson. We first wanted to comment on the supporting information submitted by the proposer on the 19th of April. The recently submitted application is of a much larger building than was originally proposed when the outline planning permission was granted. It is the differences in the proposal that are being objected to, not the actual application. There has been more recently been a very slight reduction proposed in the height of the building. However, this still means an overall height of 9.1 metres, way in excess of those buildings it flanks. For comparison, Sluicairn is approximately 6.9 metres in height. Likewise, the overall depth and height of the proposed building are far in excess of immediate properties. The proposed dwelling therefore swamps Sluicairn Cottage, when the sizes of the two buildings are compared. This dwelling is totally incourteous to neighbourhood dwellings in terms of massing, scale, character and appearance. We believe this is therefore contrary to the terms of local development policies, and planning permission should be refused. Due to the sloping ground on the site, we believe consideration should be given to a single-storey building on the northern side, which would allow for a two-storey building facing the Solway. This will be in line with other adjacent properties and significantly impact positively on objections. There appears to be a misleading statement in the document of 19th of April, which suggests retaining walls would not be seen. This appears to refer to any walls to the north of the building. Any walls to the south of this would be visible and totally not in keeping with either post or rail fencing or hedges used elsewhere. There is an error in the committee report which states that the western boundary to Sluicairn Cottage is defined by a block wall. This is incorrect, as it is a hedge and a fence. Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan highlights that the use of retaining walls can be unsightly and detract from the local landscape and make the development unduly prominent. We believe this does exactly that. The proposer's document also claims that the design has been created to ensure privacy in relation to adjacent dwellings. As pointed out in our original objection, there are windows on the south-west elevation which directly overlook the rear of Sluicairn, thus totally disregarding any privacy for ourselves. This fact also seems to have been omitted from the committee reports, which doesn't highlight the impact of overlooking on Sluicairn. The location and block plans show 4 outbuildings to Sluicairn, one of which appears to obscure some overlooking. However, this is inaccurate, as this and other of those buildings haven't been present for at least 6 years. The original outline planning permission that was granted showed a building with no windows on the southwest elevation, and we believe this should therefore also be incorporated into the design to prevent overlooking and respect the privacy of our neighbouring properties. The documents pay no homage to the existing tree halfway down the overall plot of land. This is an annual nesting site for birds as at present, and removal of it would have a significant negative impact on local aspect. Chair, that's the 3 minutes up, and there's still a couple of paragraphs to go on that statement.
Just conclude the 2 paragraphs, please, Tracy.
There is a claim that in this proposer's document that only a small collective have been objected to this development. As the neighbour notification list consisted of just 5 addresses, 3 of those addresses have objected, 60%, which cannot be considered a small minority. As with any planning development, only a permitted number of neighbours are advised directly. For comparison, a local new housing development of 130 houses, where 24 letters were sent out, received just 4 written objections. There is also a comment that representations follow common themes of this minority. The fact that several people commented on similar themes simply highlights the fact that these contentious issues in this application impact significantly on a number of people. Thank you for the time allowing our views to be heard and considered, and ask that the proposal in its current format is refused.
Thanks, Tracy. Members, and hopefully the agent will have seen the drawings that were submitted by the applicant. They've been rotated by Carla. So we will come now to the agent, and that will give the agent an opportunity to make reference to these drawings, because they will be probably discussed when we are in session. So Ewan McFarlane, Ewan, if you're there, please, welcome this morning. You will have 3 minutes to make your presentation to the committee. I will remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And if you could remain in case members have a question or questions for you, I'd be grateful. So just whenever you're ready, Ewan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application highlights the challenges of sloping sites. The proposal's footprint depth is 1.5 metres smaller, and the length of the proposal is 800 millimetres smaller than the approved principle. That's an 11% reduction in the footprint that has been previously approved. Scale, mass and proportion. Examples of similar dwellings in the small building group from the case officer's report clearly shows already approved and constructed larger 1.5, 1 3/4 and 2-storey dwellings within 100 metres of the proposal. Distances to Meadow Bank is over 43 metres and to 8 Annan Hill over 39 metres. Heights. Hopefully we've provided you with a site section that clears some of the other questions we've had this morning. The first floor level for accessibility is 1.2 metres below the road level, not 2 metres as reported in the case officer's report. The mean rear elevation height of the proposal is 7.2 metres, not 10 metres as reported. It does fall to 9.1 metres at one point in the low corner. Meadowbank has a ground floor level which is 1.35 metres below the proposal's ridge height, so anyone of a standard size would look from the ground floor over the ridge to the sawway and beyond. Sluicairn has a ridge 1.6 metres above the proposal's ridge, and in addition to this has a chimney extending over 3.01 metres above the proposal's ridge, with a similar ground floor level to the proposal. The proposal has 2 rear dormers gables required for the first floor usability with the revised roof pitch. Sluicairn has 3 dormers, Meadowbank has 2 dormers, and there are local examples present with 5 rear dormers and 4 front dormers, including additional balconies. As accredited energy assessors, the use of solar gain is vital with regards to sustainability and to reduce carbon emissions. Long windows are present along the small buildings group, including Fairfield to the immediate east, 1 Annan Hill to the north, and Estuary House to the west of the small building group, as well as others in between. The Crown land on the shoreline is 375 metres away, which is quarter of a mile to the south, facing the Solway Firth and the Lake District. A quote from your guidance: capturing or framing views of surrounding landscape should be incorporated. The changes that have been made: the roof pitch has been reduced from 40 degrees to 35 degrees, an equivalent of reducing the depth of the building by 1.8 metres. Sluy Cairn and Meadowbank roof pitches are around 50 degrees. The proposal has moved a further 2.5 metres east away from Sluy Cairn than that approved under the PIP. The change of materials have been done to make it more in keeping and traditional with the local surroundings. In summary, in our professional opinion, the proposal is to a scale, mass, proportion, character and form that suits its location. The proposal has an 11% smaller footprint than the planning permission in principle established for 28 years, with no cognizance of site levels previously. Glazing is in line with national planning building standards, carbon reduction ambitions. Reasonable design changes have been undertaken with no realistic scale or mass alternatives. After 28 years of planning permission in principle renewals, does Dumfries and Galloway Council suggest that the site is now undevelopable, unlike very similar proposals in the small building group?
You have 30 seconds to go, Ewan.
I'd like to invite the committee to a site visit if they are unsure of the complex locality. Another quote from your guidance says, design is not just what it looks and feels like, design is how it works. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ewan. Just remain, please, in case members have questions for you. Have you got the chat function, Ewan? Can you see the last image that David Sutty has placed in the chat, which is something that Councillor McClellan was looking for?
Chair, we've actually improved that section through to provide that information. That was sent off to Tracy yesterday to try and support our presentation there, so I'm not sure if Tracy's got that available or not, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll see if Tracy has anything. In the meantime, I'll invite Councillor McClellan back in first, just in case you have questions for you, and if no, we'll go into session. Henry.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Hello, Mr McFarlane. The question I've got, it really follows on from the raised earlier with the case officer regarding a site sectional elevation. I know you tried to explain there with levels. Am I correct in thinking then that you've sent something along those lines to Tracy yesterday?
Thank you, Councillor McClellan. Yes, as I say, going through our report and our obviously support and submission there, we were quite aware that it didn't give the context of the site and its surroundings. It gave it purely just in relation to the site. So we've provided that. It's the same cross section, but what we've done is we've added in the floor level of Meadowbank at the top, which, as I say, is just below the ridge of the proposal, and we've also put in the ridge level of Sluy Cairn at the side, which, as I say, is 1.6 higher than the ridge, plus it's got a 1.4 metre chimney on it as well.
Can I come back with a further question, Chair?
Absolutely, Henry.
Yeah, the slides that were shown as part of the objector's position do they represent and are they reflective of your section? Do you agree with those images?
Thank you, Councillor McClellan, for your question there. No, that's obviously the first time we've seen them over a very short period of time. Especially the section from, it will be from the west kind of road looking towards the site. The building, the proposal is obviously it's sitting a lot higher than where it actually is due to ground levels and stuff. And again, as I say, to try and put the heights into context, as I say, if you were standing on the ground floor of Meadowbank, the ridge height of the proposal it's 1.39, I think it is, below the floor level, below the ridge level of the proposal. So basically anybody of average height would be able to look over the ridge towards the Solway Firth and beyond.
Thanks, Henry. So we're still in questions for the agent. We're not in session yet. I would caution members about making decisions on images provided by objectors or applicants. We have our case officers who are charged with providing as much information and detail as we can get. If we're not happy with that, we can look for others. So there you go. Can all members see that new image that's up on screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, yes.
Brilliant. So Henry, does that assist you at all?
Absolutely, Chair. Yep. I would have expected something probably a bit different than that section through the site and adjoining site, but that does give the type of information that I was certainly looking for, Chair. So I'm quite happy to go into session and use that sketch as forming part of the discussion.
Okay, thanks for that, Henry. So if there are no other questions for Ewan, thank you for your...
Apologies for the question, Chair. Just before you move on to session there, I was just wanting to mainly ask if the committee members are happy with the layout of that section there, or whether they require any explanation on it.
Well, you're not allowed to do that anyway, Ewan. You've given us some information that was looked for, and we're now in a process. So if we require any further information, we'll come back to you, and it'll be for a different meeting on a different day. But thanks very much for that offer, Ewan. Members, we're now in session. Jim McComb, please. And then Councillor Dryborough.
Sorry, Chair, it's not me. I don't have a question.
All right, yours is flashing then. Oh, is it Jane Maitland or is it John Martin? Oh, Jane Maitland. Okay, Jane, please. And then Archie.
Thank you very much. Chairman, I have read the report carefully. I've looked at the height, looked at the massing, the scale, the design, and I have to say I actually agree with the case officer. So I propose we agree the recommendation.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'm happy to second Councillor Maitland on that one.
Okay, doke. Thank you. So we have a proposal to go with the officer recommendation and a seconder. Do we have any alternative views?
Certainly got my hand up, Chair.
Who's got their hand up? Oh, Ian Carruthers, I haven't seen it. It's much more helpful if members are able to use the chat function. It comes up quicker for folk that's watching, like Tracy, Governance and myself. But Councillor Carruthers, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, I apologise for that. What's happened is my Wi-Fi is went down, so I'm working on my phone, so I am finding all this stuff quite difficult to see and consider properly. So, I mean, I'm unminded, Chair, to have a site visit in regards to this. I do know this area well. It sits in my own ward. We're good. As far as I'm concerned, as a planning application committee, is very good at listening to representations and the applicant when it comes to these. I know this area reasonably well, but I know some of the houses that would, from memory, would certainly be much larger in size and scale in regards to this, and they're only a short distance away, Chair. But I would certainly look for a site visit in this regard to further consider the aspects that have been raised, points in particular by both the representatives and the applicant himself. And there is some, I see this, it is in front of us. I do think it's right. We see the ridge height, finished floor levels, ground levels and such like, but it still doesn't do it for me, Chair. I would propose to have a site visit.
Thanks for that, Ian. Okay, well, if that, we'll deal with that matter first. I've got Councillor McClelland.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very much minded to the support Councillor Carruthers and the site visit. I really do think, obviously, like Councillor Carruthers, I'm aware of the plot and the surrounding area, but I don't think all members will be aware of the vast variance in the buildings around the site. So I really do recommend a site visit before we actually make a decision on this application.
Thanks for that, Henry. So we have a proposal and a seconder for a site visit. Are there any alternative views? Well, I've got Councillor Dryborough, then Councillor Drysdale, and then Councillor Howie, is it? Oh, it's Fairbairn. Well, you're second. Councillor Fairbairn seconding the proposal for a site visit. So I'll no need to invite Councillor Fairbairn to speak. I've got Pauline and then Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to point members out to page 27, just food for thought here, with regards to the fact that the report states that there would be the boundary treatments would mitigate problematic overlooking issues, which potentially would compromise the standards of residential amenity. And taking in these factors into account, it's considered that the proposed dwelling would not give rise to material negative impact on neighbouring dwellings in terms of overshadowing. So I would concur with my fellow councillors who would like a site visit, in that we need to see what sort of privacy issues would be affected as per the constituents who've got concerns about that, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think we've got enough information on this to make a decision today. And if the applicant or so wishes, you can come back on a free shot. But I think we've got the information available today to make the decision, and I would not like to go on a site visit. I know the area very well, as does Councillor McClelland and Carruthers. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Are there any supporters for Archie's view? Jane Maitland.
Yes, I'm very happy to support Councillor Dryborough. Excuse me, Chairman, sorry. Actually, I also know the area very well because my husband was involved in developing some properties in Back of the Hill some 30 years ago. So I too know the area very well.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, then, Tracy, we have a motion to conduct a site visit and an amendment that we have enough information before us to determine the application today. Can you just remind members what motion amendment is and take us through the vote, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So the motion was proposed by Councillor Ian Carruthers. Seconder, I had Henry down for that because he came in first before Doug to go with that. So that was to defer consideration of the application for a site visit to be arranged. And the amendment is proposed by Councillor Archie Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Jane Maitland, not to have a site visit and to agree to consider the application at the meeting today. Chair.
Amendment.
Vice Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Motion, sorry, I had my mic on. Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
As I missed the start of the meeting, this item I'll abstain.
Thanks. Councillor Tate.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
I'll just check Councillor McKee and Councillor Sloan. I'll just double check that they haven't joined the meeting, Chair.
Thanks, Tracy. Seems not.
So the motion carries 12 votes to 6 with 1 abstention. So the application has been deferred for a site visit to be arranged.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, members. Move on to agenda item number 6, an application for the formation of door opening window opening and 2 dormer windows to rear elevation, and formation of door opening to gable elevation at 16 Union Street, Kirkcudbright. The application is a full application. Recommendations to approve unconditionally. The reference number is 21/0412/full. Case officer is Claire Kirkcudbright. Claire's off today, so David Sutty will take us through this particular application. David, do you want us to take us through the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. If we can have the first slide, please. This shows the context of the application site. It's at the western, more historic end of Kirkcudbright. As you can see, it's quite densely built up in that area, a lot of terraced properties with a sort of central garden area in the middle. And on the next slide, it's really just the same again, but the actual location plan. And the next slide will just zoom in on that a little more and show you the block plan. You might notice that there's an area of land directly to the west, to the left of the main property, number 16, which is its garden ground there. And the next slide shows you the existing elevations. So on the top left-hand side, you've got the front elevation, so you can see where there's the existing windows and door fronting onto the street. At the top right, you can see the existing situation where at the ground floor level, there are 2 fairly small windows. The one on the left-hand side is for a living room, and the one on the right-hand side is for a toilet. Then moving to the first floor, that window above the one on the left-hand side is for a landing rather than a habitable room. And then on the top floor, you can see some Velux roof lights existing for a bedroom on the top floor. And the next slide just shows the internal layout of the property. And the next again is just a section through that. So you can see the cut through of the property. The next slide is probably the important one, which shows you the proposals. And there's nothing, as you can see, being changed on the front elevation. Moving first to the lower one, the gable elevation, you can see there's a door now proposed going in there with a small vision screen going in there. And really the main focus of the objections that have come in relate to what's on the rear elevation on the top right-hand side. So you can see there that there are proposed on the top floor, there's 2 traditional style dormers. Then directly under the right-hand dormer there, you can see there's a new window going in. That would actually be due to the internal layout being quite considerably changed within the property. That would be for a landing rather than a habitable room. The window on the first floor left-hand side, which presently is for a landing, would become a bathroom. And you've got the 2 existing windows for the living room and the toilet would be retained, but you can also see there's a proposed new door going in with a small vision screen on it as well to the rear elevation. The next slide just shows the internal arrangements, how that would all change compared to the existing. And then a section again on the next slide just shows the staircase, how it would change internally. And the last of the plans shows the elevations for the door and window details. Again, these are considered to be acceptable materials for a listed building. There is a separate listed building application, as you all noted in the report, but the level of objection to it didn't trigger a referral to committee, so that will be dealt with separately under delegated powers. So moving on to the photos, that's the front elevation, and as I said, there's no change proposed to the front elevation. The next slide shows the gable, and the proposed door is actually hidden behind that white painted wall front to the street. So there's no real visible change to the public elevation. And the next slide is probably the most critical one again, because you can see, unfortunately, I don't have a slide that shows the toilet window on the far right-hand side. It's obscured by another building, but there's a passageway that runs between that building and the rear of number 16. So you can see where you've got the existing first floor landing window, and beneath that a small window to the living room, and then some Velux roof lights at the top of the building. The next few slides just show that what this area, actually, sorry, Lara, could you maybe go back to the last photo? It's just to stress that this area here is not a private garden for one property. It's a communal drying green that's shared by a number of different properties. So I think that's actually quite important to consider, that the level of privacy that you would normally expect for a private garden is different to that you would expect in a communal drying green. So the next few photos just actually show how that communal area is already overlooked by a number of adjacent properties. And the next slide again shows the same thing. And again. So the degree of privacy to the communal drying green is quite limited. In terms of the dormer design, the next two slides show that the amended design that came in, there was a previous application that was withdrawn that wasn't considered to be acceptable, but it has been redesigned in accordance with consultation with the case officer and the built heritage officer. And it basically follows the properties that you can see there, particularly that one that's on the screen just now. The dormer windows would be very similar to that traditional style rather than, say, a box dormer. So in planning terms, we consider the materials and design are acceptable. It really all falls down in terms of the objections to the loss of privacy as much as anything else. And from a planning perspective, as I say, the level of amenity which you would normally attribute to a communal drying green is not the same as you would have for a private garden. So there are no overriding planning concerns which would merit a refusal, in our opinion. Next year.
Thanks, David. Okay, members, we have questions for the case officer, please. In the absence of that, it would appear there are no questions, although I see Stephen Thompson's activity. Yeah, Stephen, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I turned my mic off before I'd finished typing. Yeah, so I think it's just on the when I read this, I think I didn't really know how to compute the sort of privacy level that we should be looking at here, and I appreciate that we don't deal with civil matters to do with property ownership, for example, here. But the way I read it was, it seems to be that the houses to the rear of the front-facing ones that face onto Union Street seem to use the shared space, and I don't know how many other doors actually open onto that shared drying green, as it were, but it'd be helpful to know. So I'm just sort of trying to fit this property, number 16, into having a rear door onto a shared space that might have been seen as the amenity for other spaces, just to get a sense of context, because I'm not that familiar with this area. And small changes in an area like this would have a big difference potentially. So it's really just to get a sense of that. So how many doors would there be opening onto this area from other dwellings? And are any of those on the main Union Street, facing onto that street?
Thanks, Stephen. David?
Chair, I'm afraid I don't actually have an answer to that question, which I can confirm how many properties have doors onto it. Certainly Harts Close does seem to be the main source of the objections that have come in. So I assume all of those properties would have access onto it. And I think there are a number of other ones that are on, what's it called, onto the actual street, onto Union Street itself, may have access. As you rightly say, we don't have, as a planning authority, the the locus to comment on private ownership. So in terms of the legal right to form a new door access onto that communal area, that's a private civil matter which would have to really be established between the various parties. But in terms of the amenity issues, because it is a communal drying area rather than opening onto somebody's private individual garden, then we didn't consider that there was such a large issue. Given as well that there are a number of windows that have views out onto that, the proposed dormers would be at a high level and would be given a fairly restricted view down onto that area immediately in front of it. We do have an objector representing a number of the parties who will be speaking shortly, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of the questions that you might have about the number of individual properties that can access onto it at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
I take it there isn't any policy or conditions that would prevent such an approval being granted by the Planning Applications Committee? David?
Chair, no, there aren't. Basically, if there are any restrictions in terms of land ownership, then that is a separate matter, but there's no planning grounds I can see in which to actually refuse the formation of the door.
Thanks for that. Okay. Any other questions for the case officer? Jane Maitland, please.
No planning grounds, Mr. Satie. I'm just sort of curious about, would this come under listed building consent then, which was not objected to? Any planning grounds for objecting? Because, I mean, there's an argument to say that we are proposing to substantially change a listed building.
David, but I think, Jane, what David was saying was there could be a civil action taken to prevent that, but there's no policies that would prevent us. I think that was the question that David responded to, but can you sort Jane's question out, please, in terms of listed buildings?
Thank you, Chair. That's absolutely correct. That was the point I was making about the civil aspect side of it. Yes, there is a separate listed building consent application, which does involve a considerable amount of internal changes more than external. But the actual changes externally are limited to the formation of the two dormer windows, which we consider are acceptable in terms of the appearance and character of the listed building, the one additional window at first floor level, and the two doors, one onto the rear elevation and one onto the gable elevation, all of which are in suitable design and materials. So in planning terms, we're comfortable with them.
Thanks, David. Any other members? Okay. In that case, we'll go on to the registered speakers. I have Glenn Murray, and he will only have 3 minutes, but he is speaking on behalf of T. Ryan, K. Holland, P. Taylor, Jai Wardman, P. Alvey, Jai Gordon, and P. Taylor. So this gentleman's representing himself, obviously, and 7 others. Glenn, are you with us?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Brilliant. So Glenn, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes to make a presentation to the committee. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And if you'd be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you, I'd be grateful. So just whenever you're ready, Glenn, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and members, for this opportunity to speak today. It's greatly appreciated. I'm speaking for myself and for 7 of my neighbours. We all own or occupy properties that have in their title the right to use the garden, sitting out and clothes drying area at the end of Harts Close, which the rear wall of Union Street, 16 Union Street, forms the boundary with that area. There has never been a door in the rear wall of 16 Union Street, and that property has never had title to use the Harts Close garden area. The garden area is not a public space. It belongs in common to the properties that we own or occupy. This small area, or such of it as that is still not overlooked, is the only private outdoor space available to our properties. We grow vegetables there, we hang our washing there, we enjoy the fresh air and when it shines, the sunshine and privacy there. The area is fundamental to our residential and amenity and quality of life. For the avoidance of doubt, we don't in any way object to the proposed door onto the gable elevation of 16 Union Street, which would open onto the applicant's own property. However, all 8 of us submitted written objections to the proposed alteration to the rear of 16 Union Street, referring to section 5.1 of the local development plan, which states that alterations should avoid causing a significant loss of privacy or quality of life to neighbouring residents, either to their dwelling or directly overlooking their garden. 2 of our objections were accompanied by photographs showing that the proposed door would open directly onto our vegetable garden and could not be used without walking over the plants. One of our washing line poles would be about a metre in front of that door, as you can see in the photographs we submitted, and our sitting area is just a few metres beyond that. So the proposed door cannot possibly be used without causing significant loss of privacy, residential amenity and quality of life to those of us who have the shared title to this space and who use it daily. The committee report dismisses these points without explanation. The report also dismisses our objections to the proposed window and dormers, saying that there are already window openings within the rear elevation of the property. But the photographs show clearly that one of the ground floor windows is tiny and is frosted, and that the other does not overlook our garden area because it's behind the shed to the right of the photographs, something that the application's elevation drawings do not show, although the photograph does. The existing first floor window is also very small, and the existing roof windows are in the slope of the roof and don't overlook the garden area at all. So our garden area is not currently intrusively overlooked by the existing windows. However, the proposed very large first floor window and 2 extremely large dormers would intrusively overlook our garden area and would cause significant loss of privacy and residential amenity. All of the immediate neighbours would be adversely affected by the proposed alterations to the rear wall of 16 Union Street, and therefore we respectfully request that in accordance with section 5.1 of the local development plan, the committee protects our privacy and quality of life by refusing the proposed door opening, window opening and 2 dormer windows in that rear wall. Thank you, Chair and members.
Thanks very much, Glenn, and thanks for being so concise with your 3 minutes. Members, any questions for Glenn? And remember, he's representing another 7 members of the local community as well. Stephen Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just ask Glenn about, it's really the door is the one that I'm really sort of that seems to stick in my mind, because obviously you described there that in order to use a door, for it to be of any use, you have to go in and out of it, and to go in and out of it, you have to sort of impose yourself on space to either side of the door. So I'm curious as to, obviously the residents you represent aren't necessarily from Union Street, but from Harts Close, and I'm trying to get a sense of, I'm not familiar with the area, so it's like how many other doors would open onto that shared area, and are any of them from the Union Street houses that would normally open only out onto the Union Street itself or into their own private space behind?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Thompson. My property at 12 Union Street, which does have a front door onto Union Street, has got a door out into that garden area. And the immediately adjacent house, number 14, has a door which opens onto my property and is actually never used by agreement, because it was built at a time when planning probably would not have allowed it. So that property, which is a holiday property, does not use that door. So there is only one door from a property in Union Street that opens onto that. And the reason it does so is just an accident of the history of ownership in the Union Street and Harts Close.
Thanks, Stephen. I have Jim McComb and any others. Jim McComb, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Murray, you stated that the drying area is not overlooked, but yet in the earlier presentation we saw a number of windows which appeared to overlook that area.
Thank you, Councillor McComb. What I said was that it's not currently intrusively overlooked, because the smallest of the window is very small and is frosted glass, so it doesn't have an outlook. The one next to that is also small, and the windows in the roof are on the pitch of the roof, so they look skywards and do not overlook our garden area. So at the present moment, the existing windows do not intrusively or significantly overlook our area. On the other hand, the proposed windows in dormers would substantially and intrusively overlook our garden area, and an area where we set out and grow vegetables.
I don't think Glenn, Mr. McComb was asking, or Councillor McComb was asking about the application. He was asking about adjoining properties that seem to have large windows to the rear that must look onto somewhere, and I think he was looking for some clarity about adjoining properties.
Yeah, I beg your pardon, Chair. The number 14 does have windows that look out onto the small strip of ground that goes between my rear door and the section of the drying green and setting out area and garden that is overlooked by 16 Union Street. But that area, the area in question, the area that where the boundary is 16 Union Street, is the area where we set out, where we grow vegetables and where we hang our clothes. The small area that's overlooked by the windows in 14 Union Street is not so significant to our amenity.
Thanks for that clarity. Glenn, is that what you're looking for, Jim?
That's what I was after. But I have another point with regard to the gable door. You said, Mr. Murray, you have no objection to the gable door. Is it not the case that the presence of a gable door would therefore confer a degree of access to the applicant?
No, Councillor McComb. The proposed gable, the door in the gable of the property would open out into a small yard, which is separated from our property by a high wall. That property belongs to 16 Union Street. It would offer no access whatsoever or overlooking of our garden area at the foot of Hart's Close.
So it's quite enclosed from the drying area for Hart's Close.
Entirely, yes.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Murray, it's a simple question. I think you've touched on it already. That's two parts to it. One was, I think you're saying that if the door was to be constructed and formed, that the householders, the owners within there, wouldn't have a legal right to step out of that, having got access rights. And the second part was, did you mention that there's a holiday let in there as well? Could you clarify that and where it is, please?
Yes, the legal situation is extremely complicated, and I think, as Mr. Sutty said, it's not. You know, we can't really go into that in detail here, but there would almost certainly be a legal challenge because there are complications in the legal situation, and it's not without going into legal detail here. We have looked into this, and it would be extremely problematic for the occupiers to use the door if it was created. So, could you repeat the second part of your question, please, Councillor? I didn't quite get it.
Certainly, I think you mentioned there was a holiday let in there somewhere. Just it was clarity in that.
I beg your pardon. There is 14 Union Street is a holiday let, and so it's infrequent. Well, it's not occupied all the time.
Thanks, Mr. Murray. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, if there are no other questions for the objector, Glenn, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you,
thanks for your presentation answering the questions. We now have a Mark Batchelor who is speaking on behalf of Jessica Cheney, who is the applicant, and Mark's with us via Teams. Mark, you'll be afforded the same, if you're with us, the same 3 minutes. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And if you'd be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you, I'd be grateful. So, Mark, if you're there, just whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, councillors. Many thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Batchelor. I'm Planning Director of a national consultancy called Boyer. I don't actually think I'll need to take up too much of your time this morning on what actually strikes me as a very simple and straightforward domestic proposal, the like of which the council will no doubt have considered on numerous previous occasions. What you're being asked to consider today is a proposal for small-scale alterations to a house, including 2 single entrance doors to the side and rear elevations, a first floor window which will serve as stair and landing, and 2 small rear dormer window extensions to replace existing roof lights. The application before you is the second that my client has submitted for the alteration of the house. The first was withdrawn earlier this year following quite extensive dialogue with officers, and their advice was taken on board in the preparation of this revised proposal. Your officers have set out in their report the reasons why the proposal is acceptable and policy compliant, and they have explained that it complies fully with those policies, and I don't need to rehearse those points. Of course, we're aware that there are concerns and objections submitted by surrounding residents. My understanding is that actually a lot of the concern is in relation to matters of land ownership and issues of legal title, which of course are irrelevant to the outcome of the application, and that's been set out properly by your officers in the report that you have. The objections that have been raised on the grounds of loss of privacy and amenity, I have some difficulty in understanding. My client's proposal includes the formation of a new first floor window which will serve a non-habitable space. It will serve the landing to the relocated access there. It's not a habitable room and not a habitable room window. The first floor habitable room windows face to the front of the property. At roof level, the dormers are well set back from the eaves line, and at that height they don't provide any downward views into the drying green. The views will be more distant rather than having any impact whatsoever on amenity in that location. Moreover, I think that it's fair that your officer's approach to the consideration of this issue is that as a communal drying green, it doesn't have the same expectation of privacy as one would expect with a private domestic garden. It's a communal space. My understanding is there are 11 or 12 properties who all have access to it and share that space, and there are numerous other windows that look across it, as shown by your officers in their presentation. As such, members, I'm confident that the proposal is compliant with the objectives of relevant planning policy. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as best as I'm able, but otherwise I hope you'll agree with your officers and my own assessment of the case and will approve my client's proposal. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks for being brief. Members, any questions for the applicant's agent, Mark? Pauline Drysdale, Councillor Drysdale, please.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for your presentation. I don't know if it's possible at this stage, Chair, could we just have a look back at the ground floor plans again as to exactly where the new door is going to lie? Because I was going to go back online, but I think it should take me some time. Is that possible, Chair, or have I missed my slot there? Thanks.
Ask me this again, Pauline.
I was wondering if we could see the plans again.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Plans are there. Is that the one, or do you want to go further back?
I'm just waiting for it to come up. Hang on. Yeah, Lara, it's not coming up on my screen. Can any other councillors see it?
You want to see where the door's going to be formed,
Yeah.
and you want to see the plan. Well, it's not that one. It must be the rear view.
Yeah, the rear view. That's it, Jerry. Yeah, I can't see it as yet. I could go in online, I suppose, to my other. There we go. Yeah. Is there an internal plan?
An internal layout, but
Yeah,
that's the visualisation from the drying green looking at the property.
I understand that, Chair. It'd be helpful for myself just to see the internal layout.
Chair, that was actually the last slide that Laura had. That's on screen just now.
Sorry, David. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. So which is the ground floor? Far. It's difficult to tell. They're so tiny.
Top left.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of, Mark, if I could just come in terms of a design perspective, the other door going out to 16 Union Street, is that on a different level? I'm sorry, I'm finding it hard to look at these plans properly.
So I think if I can hopefully help just talk you through it. The top of the drawing to the top left of the image you're looking at there, the door you can see there is directly off Union Street. Moving right to the outside, the gable elevation, that's one of the new doors that opens onto the garden ground associated with number 16. And then on the bottom of that drawing, sort of midway across the elevation, you can see a new door centrally provided there, and that's what would open out onto the drying green.
Right, okay. And the last question is, would you have any legal civil dispute possibilities with regards to opening out onto 16 Union Street if that's their ground or not? If that makes sense.
Sorry, no, could you just repeat that? I'm not sure I quite followed the question.
So the first opening you showed us is going to open out onto the land owned by 16 Union Street, is that correct? And if so, could that cause you any legal wrangles in the future? Or have you already?
We're not here to sort out legal wrangles, Pauline. We're here to determine a planning application.
Yeah, exactly, Jim. But I suppose my thoughts are if that would be the case, then that might be something that needs considered by the.
For us to decide. David's put a little plan on the chat. Can you see it, Pauline?
I can, Chair. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Pauline. Jane Maitland won't speak. She's now withdrawn. Any other questions for Mark? Okay, Mark.
Is it okay? Is it okay if I just a quick one?
Yeah, right.
It just in the balance of, I suppose, natural justice, but the previous question I asked to the speaker for the representatives, Mark, was around about the. I suppose it's a legal question similar to what Councillor Rydell's just brought up there. So it just goes back to that particular point and the potential for conflict. And has this dwelling got the legal right to open that door and walk onto that ground? Chair, please, I'm only being fair in regards to put it to the representative. Only fair that Mark has a chance to be asked and answer the same question. Thank you.
No, Ian, because we're not here to sort out legal wrangles. You know full well I can apply to build a house in your garden, but I wouldn't get the legal right to do it. So we're here to determine a plan application. Whether or not there's a legal wrangle doesn't matter. If this meets, if the application meets with the committee's approval and members are inclined to support it, the legal wrangle will take place elsewhere.
Chair, thank you. Listen, I mean, I really do accept your ruling regards to this. I think you thought in the interest of natural justice, you allowed the last speaker to answer it. I just thought Mark might have got a chance as well, but I accept your ruling, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks very much for that. Okay, Mark, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, sir. We're now in session, members, and please, we're not here to determine a legal wrangle. If you members are not happy with the proposals placed before you and there's a legitimate reason why you want to reject that, then please lodge it. But we're here to determine a planning application, not engage in discussions about whether or no individuals can take out a civic challenge or a civil challenge, sorry, to an application. So I've got Archie Dryborough, I've got Jane Maitland and Ivor Hislop. So Archie, Jane and Ivor.
Thanks, Chair. I think you covered what I was about to say there. This is a planning application, and our planning officers have agreed that under the policies that this is an acceptable planning application, and we should approve subject to the conditions that are applied to it. So therefore, with no further ado, I would agree with the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Archie. And are you proposing we go with the officer's recommendation?
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Maitland, please.
Thank you very much, Jim. I actually take the opposite view. While I think there is no particular problem with the dormers because they're physically set back, I also don't think there's a problem with the first floor window in terms of privacy because it's set well to the side and looks over. It looks over a roofed area, a building area, and it also serves a public part. But I do think there's a problem with the door because I think that has a major physical change to one part of that courtyard, the drying green. And I think it would actually, because there is a new opening being slapped into that area, I think there would be a change and a significant loss of privacy and amenity. And for that reason, I think we have to agree to refuse the entire application and allow the applicant to come back with something perhaps that does not have the door in it.
Jane, these are very sound planning grounds, and I'm content with that. We just can't have a debate about what's legal and what's no legal, because that's no duty today. So that's sound planning grounds, that's fine, and you'll firm that up in a fashion that will be found acceptable as a proposal to reject the application. So far, I've got a motion to approve, and I've got an amendment. Well, neither of them have been seconded yet, so neither has a position or a status. I've got Ivor Hislop, Stephen Thompson, Andy Ferguson, Pauline Drysdale, and then Henry McClelland in that order. So, Ivor Hislop, please.
Chair, I'll be quite short. I'll support Councillor Dryborough and second his motion. I think the materials and the proposal is acceptable at this location.
Thanks very much. So that's now a motion. Archie Dryborough and Ivor Hislop, a mover and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you. I've got Stephen, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think that, like Councillor Maitland, it's the door in particular that causes me the biggest problem, and I do think that it will cause a sufficient impact on the amenity for the existing residents. Unlike what's said in the report, I think we should give that more weight just because of that particular element, and I would second Councillor Maitland.
Thanks very much. That's an amendment. Okay, I've got Councillor Ferguson. Andy, please.
It's okay, Jim. I'll withdraw because I was going to second Jane Maitland.
Thank you. Pauline Drysdale, please.
Thank you for letting me in, Chair. I would agree and concur with Councillor Maitland's statement regarding the material grounds re the loss of privacy and amenity with regards to the ground floor door. What I wanted to ask, Chair, was instead of actually refusing it, would we be able to come back with a condition or no? It's either a refusal or an acceptance. Could you just clarify that for me? Thanks, Chair.
To be fair, I will ask David, but I'm absolutely certain that the best or cleanest way, if we're not happy, reject it if that's what the majority members want to do, rather than start to mess about with conditions. But if there are no other speakers, I've got Henry. He very kindly withdrew. He's obviously he had his answer or his question answered. So no other speakers. I'll ask David to just clarify Pauline's question, and then I'll ask Jane and Stephen to provide a form of words that will fit with the reasons for refusal, and then we'll go to the vote. So David, can you help Pauline, please? Can we place a condition, or should we be advised to simply refuse the application?
Thank you, Chair. It's normally a matter of fact and degree as to when you can actually attach a condition saying, notwithstanding what's shown on the drawing, no permission is granted for this. My view is that the description of the application is formation of door opening, window opening, and two dormer windows to the rear elevation, and formation of door opening to gable elevation. It's so integral to the actual description of this application that I think you'd have no option other than to take it or leave it. It's an approve or refuse of what you see before you. I don't think you could competently condition that.
Pauline, you content with that advice?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, David. Yeah, I am content with that advice. It just, in my view, seems a lot of more administration time and money, but I accept that decision. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, David.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Okay, Jane, you and Stephen, can you come up with a form of words, please, that will fit your reasons for proposing a refusal of this application?
Chairman, I think we refuse it on the basis that the door, how would you describe it? The part of the application that requires a door will create a loss of privacy and amenity to surrounding property, an unacceptable loss of privacy and amenity, and detriment to amenity to the surrounding properties.
Okay, David.
Chair, as normal, I would suggest that if you're going to go down that route, that you actually couch it in terms of LDP 2 policies. So that would be policy OP1A, general amenities, so that you're specifically stating that the formation of the door opening in the rear elevation, because it is quite specifically that one by the sound of it, would result in an undue loss of privacy to adjoining nearby residents, something along those grounds.
Jane,
Thank
are
you.
you content with that advice?
Suitably tidied up, and thank you for the advice, yes. But it's entirely in line with what I think Councillor Thompson and I are trying to express.
Thank you. In that case, Tracy, can you confirm the mover and seconder both of, well, thanks, Stephen as a seconder has also accepted that that's, or agreed that that's that approach by Jane is acceptable. So mover and seconders the motion, and then the amendment and exactly what that amendment reads, Tracy, and then we'll go to the vote, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So a motion proposed by Councillor Dryburgh, second by Councillor Hislop, is to approve the application unconditionally as per the report. Amendment proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Thompson, is to refuse the application on the grounds that the formation of the door, which forms part of the application, would be contrary to LDP policy OP1A and would not be acceptable in this location, as it would cause significant loss to privacy and loss of amenity, which would be detrimental to neighbouring properties.
Correct.
Thanks, Chair. So we'll move to the vote, Chairman.
A motion, please.
Vice Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McClelland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Tate.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Young.
I think he was abstaining, Chair. I'm not sure. Thanks.
Yes.
Oh, you're probably right. Yes, aye. Thanks for that, Pauline.
So the amendment carries 10 votes to 8. The application has been refused.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We move on to agenda item number 7. This is an application for the erection of 6-floor dwelling houses, formation of access and associated open space and infrastructure at variance with terms of condition 14 of planning permission 19/1895/full to allow development to commence on site without the requirement to have upgraded the Lockthorn Library junction before that commencement, but instead requiring upgrade of this junction to have taken place prior to the occupation of any of the dwelling houses, which makes it a section 42 application at site adjacent to the former Interfloor factory, Edinburgh Road, Dumfries. Application type section 42. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. The reference number is 21/0279/S42, and the case officer is Chris McTeer. So Chris, if you're with us, can you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The application is in front of members today by virtue of being major development under the hierarchy of development regulations. As the Chair alluded to, it is also made under Section 42 of the Principal Planning Act, which is an application to develop land without compliance with conditions previously attached. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So members may be familiar with this particular application. It was in front of the November meeting of the Planning Applications Committee, and as you can see, was for the erection of 64 dwelling houses. Just as a piece of background, the applicant in this case, Springfield Homes, are developing the site on behalf of Cunningham Housing Association. So the site, as you can see from the left-hand side of the slide there, is accessed from the A701 trunk road via an upgraded junction that currently exists at Lockthorn Library, which I think should be shown on the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the existing junction at the library now. An upgraded junction was required by Transport Scotland. Now, this was recommended as part of the conditions which were attached to the permission which we issued back in November. If we can just run through the next couple of slides just to show the site. So this is where the new access will be, just from within the grounds of the library. Next slide, please. This was also for additional parking, which would be lost from the library. Next slide. It's just looking across to the old Interfloor factory. So the site is quite large. Next slide. Okay, so I'll leave this one here just now. Now, when members issued the consent, there were other conditions attached to it, and with a development of this type, there was a requirement for a traffic management plan. Once the development had been approved, works started pretty quickly on discharging particular conditions that were attached, which is in common for a development of this type. Now, the TMP came in and it was agreed between Roads and Transport Scotland that construction access would take place at the existing access, which is shown in the slide here from the A701. Now, both Roads and Transport Scotland were happy that construction could start. However, the trigger point in the condition about the upgraded Lockthorn access meant that even though we had agreed that construction access could be taken from this particular point via the traffic management plan, the way that it was worded in the condition with the library junction, the trigger point for that was no development could take place until those works had been completed. So the two conditions were at odds with one another. So with the agreement of Transport Scotland, who were content to allow construction access from this existing junction, as shown in the slide, works could carry out in tandem, but it also meant that just in the interests of moving this particular site forward, which is the subject of quite a large amount of government funding for this particular development. Transport Scotland were happy that both works could continue at the same time, but we did require the original condition to be amended just in the interests of keeping everything correct and above board. And so for the reasons outlined in the committee report, it is recommended that this application is approved today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for our case officer? In the absence of any questions, members, there is non-speaking items, so we're in session. Are we happy to go with the officer recommendation?
Agreed to approve, Chair.
Archie and John did ask to speak, but if it's just to support, then that'll be fine. Otherwise, please come in, gentlemen. John
That was the case, Jim.
and Archie. Happy?
Yep.
Okay, Tracy, it's a unanimous decision of this committee. Can you just confirm what that unanimous decision is, please?
As Chair, members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions as detailed in the report.
Thank you. We're going to agenda item number 8, plan application for residential and retail mixed-use development at variance with condition 1 of planning permission in principle 16/1850/PIP to extend time period for submission of further application or applications of all of the matters specified in conditions for a further 3 years. Again, it's a section 242 application at Curry European Transport, Edinburgh Road, Lockthorn, Dumfries. The application type is a section 72. The applicant is Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership, DGHP. Reference number is 20/1963/S42. Recommendations to approve subject to conditions. And again, the case officer is Chris McTeer. Chris, you take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you can see, the application again is in front of members by virtue of it being major development. As you can see, the site split into two halves effectively. Site to the east and a site to the west of the A701. If I can just move on to the next slide, please. I've included a snapshot from the LDP2, which currently shows 2 allocations on the site. Now, the application was in front of the Planning Applications Committee back in August 2017. One of the requirements of the committee decision was the conclusion of a Section 75 legal agreement, which covered various issues, including affordable housing, education contributions, etc. And that was completed, and the planning permission for the site was issued in May 2018. So the permission currently was an in-principle condition which required various elements to come forward with a further application, including details of the housing, which is included on the eastern portion of the application site. As you can see, it's in LDP2 as DFS H205, or allocated housing site, DFS H205, I should say. What you can see is that housing site 205 leads into housing site DFS H8. Now, it's effectively the gateway into this site. It is one of the council's long-term strategic housing allocations in this particular part of Dumfries. Now, given that the permission was issued almost 3 years ago, we haven't had any of the further detail required for this. Obviously, with the adoption of LDP2, there are now very different requirements in place for this, not the least of which is for a master plan to cover site 205 and site H8. So there is currently a pre-application inquiry in from DGHP, and the master planning process is due to begin with this one, but obviously they would like to keep the permission alive. There was a condition placed on it back when it was issued, allowing for 3 years for the further detail to come in. We don't add those conditions to permissions anymore. As you can see from the committee report, it would be dealt with by way of an informative, which we would add to the permission. If we could just go through the next few slides, I've just included these so members can see where the site is and how it looks just now. This is the western section of the site. So this is the currently in use as an office building. The next slide, please. So that's just the extent of the site to the west of the A701. Next slide, please, should take us to the other side of the road. So this is just in the Heath Hall turning. So the site is everything sort of beyond the fence there. The next slide. Now, this road runs down to Catherine Field Farm, which again is part of allocation DFS H8, but that just shows the existing farm track, which runs along the southern site boundary. Next slide, please. This is just a view across the eastern section of the site. It was previously used as a truck park, but as you can see, it's currently derelict. Next slide. This just shows you the boundary of the site from the A701. I think that should be the last slide. So, yep, for the reasons outlined in the report, it is recommended that this application is approved subject to the conditions listed. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Chris. Any questions for our case officer? Ivor, please.
It's possibly a technical kind of question. The section 75 that was agreed for the previous application, does that carry on under this one? And I also note that that was with regard to school contributions. See how it's DGHP now? Are they now taking this over? Have they got ownership of this site, or does the site still belong to the previous applicant, in which case we should make sure that a condition similar to the first one in the last application, where if it's developed by a private developer, we get a contribution, or am I reading that wrong?
Two questions, Chris.
No, both perfectly valid. The reason that the section 75 took a little bit longer than we anticipated to get the planning application out the door, after the application, the previous application was considered by members before we had issued the permission. The eastern section of the site, which is the allocated housing site, was sold by Curry's to DGHP. So the site is completely in their ownership for that. So obviously, if it is being developed by a registered social landlord, then the education contributions wouldn't apply. If I suppose in theory, if it wasn't, if the site weren't being developed by an RSL, then whoever it was that was developing the site would be on the hook for education contributions. But that can be added as a condition to this permission.
Thanks, Chris. I've got Pauline Drysdale and then John Campbell, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris, for the presentation. Probably a bit in regards to both, but I'll refer to the open space and new development supplementary guidance in February 2020, Chris, and wonder if you could clarify what the developers are going to plan going forward with regards to the open space strategy, which goes alongside the Council's long-term vision for open space to develop and maintain a network of high-quality, sustainable open spaces that meet the local needs, enhance quality of life, support a healthy and diverse range of natural habitats, and contribute to the economic and social well-being of the community. So I notice in both reports, particularly this one, there is no mention of outdoor green space for X amount of houses plus. Could you just give us an update on that and let us know if that will be part of the considerations of the planners when they come forward? Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pauline. Chris?
Yeah, the previous application was an in-principle application, so it would be expected that the open space detail would follow on in the further application that came for the matter specified in conditions. So the conditions are there. The next application that comes in for the site will have to include a suitable amount of open space. Obviously, what we're looking at just now is a master plan for the site, which I'm anticipating would be brought forward as supplementary guidance, which would be adopted, I think, by the E&R committee at some point in the future. But the open space will be a consideration when we get the next phase of the application coming in. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's really great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pauline. John Campbell. John, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris. Just for a wee bit of clarification, you showed one of the photographs with the track leading to Carfenfield Farm. Is that correct? I don't know if you can get it back up, if that's possible. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I mean, I know it's sort of like a back track that goes back into the farm if you follow it all the way through, but the big building at the very end there, that's used to be the old school, and I believe it's now a nursery. So just for clarification, is this particular road going to be used as access for this particular site, or will this be external to the actual future plans when we get to see them?
Chris?
Yep, this particular access road lies out with the site boundary as it stands just now. One of the conditions of the original PIP, which would be required going forward, was that access to the site would be taken from the A701. So part of the process going forward with this one would be to secure a detailed access with Transport Scotland for that. But this particular access that you can see in the slide doesn't form part of the application.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chris. If there are no other questions for the case officers, again, members, were in session. If I don't see anything to the contrary, Archie?
Just to agree the recommendations of the report, Chair.
Agreed.
Many thanks, Archie. Jane Maitland and Ivor Hislop.
Well, Chairman, I'm really sorry. I didn't completely understand the issue that Ivor was raising, Councillor Hislop was raising, and I mean, maybe he's coming back in to discuss it now, but I would like to be clear about what that all really means. I mean, the case officer suggested we could put in another condition, and I would like some help with that, please.
Okay, I'll bring Ivor in the same thing. I mean, I know that when we do work with RSLs, we don't apply a fee per development the way we would with a private developer. We don't ask for contributions for education. But Ivor, do you want to come back in?
Chair, I took it from what Mr McTeer said was the fact that the Section 75 would continue, which has developer contributions. So if the site, say DGHP, developed to 20% and then moved on the rest of the site, the private developer would still be bound by the Section 75 agreement for school education contributions. So if that covers that point, then I'd be happy with that. But if it doesn't cover it, I would have liked to have seen a similar condition as to the first one in the previous item, where it said that if it refers back to a private sector, then developer contributions would be required.
Thanks, Ivor. I'm sure that'll be a standard requirement placed on our officers. If we get private developments, we apply a fee. If it's social housing, we don't. But Chris, can you just put Ivor and Jane's minds at rest, please?
Yeah, as far as I know, the original Section 75 still stands with that one. That was that kind of formed part of the original sort of discussions with this one. It was DGHP were slightly I think, or rather the solicitors were they did wonder why we wanted the comfort of having this in place when their client or the people who owned the site were a registered social landlord. But our argument was, well, it could subsequently be sold on to a private developer, private developer. So therefore, the council's interests needed to be protected in that case. So the Section 75 still stands. I mean, it could be if members were minded, we could add another condition in to that. But all I've done with this one is to replicate the original conditions of the PIP minus the one that had the time period for submitting the further applications on.
Oh, that's great, Ivor. I think Ivor's right, but I thought that RSLs didn't sell land on, and I thought they developed social housing, and I thought we had agreements in place that we did not apply or levy charges to registered social landlords when they were providing affordable housing. But I absolutely accept that we need to protect the council's interests. What other condition would you imagine we would apply, Chris?
I think we've used similar ones for RSL developments in the past. Maybe David could provide a bit of further clarification on that one. But certainly in the past, I think we've attached conditions to it. But as I say, as far as I know, the Section 75 will still cover any future contributions that might be required.
Well, David's just typed in as per condition 1 on page 66. So if members want to nip quickly on to page 66, condition 1 should satisfy our requirement and needs. While members are looking that up and just studying it, I've got Archie wanting to speak.
Thanks, Chair, and your my understanding is Housing Forum Chair is exactly that. The RSLs do not pay developer contributions if it's going to remain in the ownership of the RSL. But I think this was a catch-all. If the buildings were built and then sold on later to private, then the organisations that bought or individuals that should give a developer contribution.
Absolutely right, and I think that's covered in the report. So if members are content, I'll give Ivor and Jane a minute just to study condition 1 on page 66. But if members are content, we'll try and bring this to a conclusion. Ivor and Jane, or Jane and Ivor.
Chair, I think Mr McTeer's made it quite clear that the Section 75 continues, which covers the same as condition 1 in the previous paper.
Yes.
So I'd be quite happy with that. It was just the clarity of whether under the Section 42 application that changed or not, because I think you give a whole new application or something, or it's been termed that way, and I might have misinterpreted that as it was a totally new one. But I'm happy with the Section 75 if that covers it.
Right, thanks, Ivor. Are you happy too, Jane?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, then. If there are no alternative views, we will go with the officer's recommendation and the reassurance provided by Chris that the council's interests will be protected if the properties or land are sold on to private developers. Okay, Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Thanks, Chair. Members have approved the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report.
Thank you. For the next two items, Claire Eckstein will be presenting them, but she'll be using Tracy's laptop because she's in the council offices, so it might come up as Tracy, but it's Claire that's doing the presentation. So agenda item number 9. An application for the erection of dwelling house and garage and installation of septic tank, Site A, and formation of shared lay-by access at land at Redkirk, Gretna. The application type is a planning permission in principle. The applicant's Mr. Jai Mason. Reference number is 21/0151/PIP. The recommendation is to refuse, and the case officer is Claire. Claire, if you're with us, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, indeed.
This application is being considered by the Planning Application Committee because it was called in by Councillor Karen Carruthers. This application, which is for Site A, which is 21 2100151 PIP and the adjoining site 210152 PIP are both in the field to the south of Oakland, Redkirk at Gretna. Get down to next, please. Next. This shows the aerial photograph of the two sites with Redkirk to the north of the access road, which leads to Redkirk, which is on the extreme right of the photograph. And then the clump of buildings to the south is 345 Redkirk. Next. So this shows the two sites, Site A, which is one we're considering at the moment, and then Site B to the north. And it shows that they're both sharing the shared lay-by position. Next. So this shows the indicative block plan for Site A and also includes an indicative block plan for Site B. Next. So I'll just take you through the photographs. So this is the proposed shared access point for the sites A and B. This is looking along the U170 towards Oakland, and then April Cottage is to the left. Next. And this is swinging round and shows the existing boundary fence that lies between Site A and Site B. Next. And I've just this shows the swinging round again and along the road, and this is the site stable block associated with Site A. So this looks southward along the U170A towards 345 Redkirk and its outbuildings. Next. And this just shows the field that lies between Site A and the group of buildings at 345 Redkirk. Next. So this is me going back up to the top corner next to Oakland. So we're looking straight down the access road, which leads to Redkirk, and immediately to sort of centre right is Site B, and then further right is Site A. Next. And then this is just panning left from the previous photograph. So we've got Oakland on the right, April Cottage on the left, and the remainder of the houses that form Redkirk, leading up the public road, looking up the public road. Next. So we've come back down towards where it said the field, the farm outbuildings along the track to Redkirk, and this is the field gate opposite the farm buildings, which is approximately 15 metres to the east of the proposed boundary for Site B, and obviously to the left of that is Site A, and you can just about see the stable block that forms part of Site A, just sort of below the lettering of Site A. Next. And then this is looking along the southern boundary of Site A. And you can see just in the background that 3, 4 and 5 are visible in the distance. And then next, we're just swinging around, looking around back along the public road with the farm building, and then Oakland in the distance, and the public road on the left of the photograph. So next. Right. So as noted in paragraph 1.6, this application on Site A had been previously submitted under 191454 PIP, which is the same as the current proposal, other than the shared access lay-by arrangement. This was refused, and its subsequent appeal was upheld by the local review body in January 2021. So just looking at the report, and I've just brought up some extracts from the small building, the Housing in the Countryside supplementary guidance. So Redkirk has been assessed by the supplementary guidance in the Housing in the Countryside, and page 5, which is the diagram on the left, shows example of where development in small groups would be supported or refused, and then the extract on the diagram on page 7 sees examples of showing the endpoints of small building groups, which you can relate back to this application because that reflects the access road which goes up to 2 Redkirk, which lies to the north of these sites. And then the bottom diagram on bottom right hand side, this shows where farm buildings are separate, which in this case is the position with the group for 3, 4 and 5. And it says it shouldn't be included in a small building group. So clearly we've got Redkirk as a small building group, and then 3, 4 and 5 as a group of buildings as another potentially separate small building group, which are both visually separate and physically separate because they're more than sort of 250 metres apart. You'll notice in the report the agent has argued that Redkirk should be considered as one single small building group, and it's argued because of road names, postcodes and historical features. However, these are not what we use in the supplementary guidance and for the reasons for the identification of a small building group. So on the basis that Redkirk ends at the access road, which leads up to 2 Redkirk, we would consider this development a ribbon of development in the open countryside, and it is recommended for refusal on the grounds noted in the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Members, any questions for the case officer? Okay, thanks, Claire. Councillor Carden-Carruthers did intend to address the committee and unable to do so now. So Tracy will read out a statement on behalf of Karen, and then we'll go into session, members. So Tracy, if you can read out Karen's statement, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is for both this application and the next one. I'd like to apologise for not being there in person. However, this is due to prior work commitments, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have my presentation read out on my behalf. This application was discussed at the Gretna and Rig Community Council, where it got unanimous support. I have had a site visit to try and gain an understanding of how the proposal relates to the existing small buildings group. On the face of it, the proposed site sits well in relationship to what already exists, as well as there being clearly defined boundaries which would stop any potential future ribbon development taking place. Some of the reasons I would like to see these applications supported are: 1, it helps build and retain a small sustainable community in my ward. 2, this is a form of affordable housing for the applicants. 3, as part of the recovery from the pandemic, this will boost the local economy. 4, page 5 of the supplementary guidance, housing in the countryside, shows a pattern of development which is similar to what is being proposed and could be accepted. As previously mentioned, these applications have received a healthy amount of support from the local community. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Karen, for submitting that statement. Okay, members, we're now in session. Okay, Councillor Driver at Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And you know, to some extent, I've got a bit of sympathy with the applicant on this one. However, when you look at the actual site itself and the roads and the boundaries round about it, you can see where this is the potential for a growth of several other buildings. Therefore, Chair, I reluctantly, but I understand why under planning reasons and good planning reasons, I would have to agree with the recommendations that are in the report.
Thanks, Archie. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. I actually sat on the LRB that this came to, and I was actually supportive of this. When you look at the page 7, where it shows that they look at houses round about junctions. Now, if you look along one way, it goes, and this would allow you to go along the other side, and it would mirror the image of the existing development. And I think that would show that the actual housing in that location would be well related to the small building group. It also shows that further along, you could possibly get another site maybe in, and then you come to a mature tree line hedge. And that's one of the things that you can look for as a natural stop to the actual small building group. And I think on those grounds, I think along with the other proposal that will come later, without prejudging it, it makes it acceptable that you have a cluster of houses round about that junction. And I would move that on the grounds that it does form a cluster round about the junction, that we should approve this application.
Ivor, I'm sure you'll not be offended, but it has just triggered a thought of mine. Given that we're not supposed to prejudge applications, and Councillor Hislop and presumably 4 other members of this committee have sat on an LRB and made a determination, should there be a declaration of interest, or should members be allowed to continue to determine this application today, given that they've already made clear what their views on this application were in a previous forum? And I'm looking to Tracy for advice.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, each application is taken on its own merits, and this is a new application that's been submitted with a new reference number, so it's open to determination as a new application. So the previous decisions are noted within the report for members' consideration, but it doesn't preclude the members from taking part who have previously seen this application.
Okay, because I think the report says it's exactly the same as went to the LRB, in which case it's no new. But anyway, that's fine. If that's your advice, that's absolutely fine. In which case, Ivor has made a proposal to approve this application and provided grounds for that. So currently we have a motion or a proposal to approve it, to agree the recommendation by the officer, and another proposal to agree that we should approve this application on the grounds set by Councillor Hislop. Do any other members have any views?
I would second that, Chair. Councillor Hislop came across with quite a good argument.
Okay. And do we have a seconder for Councillor Dryborough? Councillor Maitland?
I have to say, Chairman, that I continue to want to follow our policies. And if you look at the aerial photograph that we have been shown, it is absolutely obvious that this is simply ribbon development and is going to coalesce with the farm at the bottom. I was very curious about the reason for calling this in terms of interest. We're given planning reasons that this was about the interest that was displayed. You know, we've got no representations. We're being told there are absolutely no representations here about it, and the statutory consultee didn't actually make any response with the first application that was made, and this application they simply discussed it among themselves. I don't think there was any effort to, you know, get any further information from other members of the public. I don't think they went out to public consultation to find out the views of the public. So, given our policies and the way that we have gone about this in the past and looked at small building groups, I can't see that there is anything that would suggest that we should go away from this, away from our policies. And this does not comply with our current policy. I support.
There is a school of thought among some members as well that it was supposedly a requirement that any call-in was based on planning grounds, but we've been kind of relaxed about that on the basis that members would make a determination on the day. But if members are keen to ensure that any call-in in the future is on sound planning grounds, I'm sure officers would follow that that instruction. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Archie and Jane on this. I do think it would represent a ribbon development contrary to our policies. And I'm also concerned that this is identical, as it says in 1.4, to a previous application, which went to a local review body. Obviously, it didn't accept the ruling of the local review body, so they've resubmitted again. It's just going to ping pong backwards and forwards until we put an end to this. So I agree with the officer's recommendation.
Thanks. If we have a request, Tracy or Claire from Councillor Young, he'd like to see an aerial photograph again, please. Councillor Fairbairn, I think what the officer and the member said was there is no evidence of that in the papers. There's no saying it didn't happen. They're saying there's no evidence presented. That's the one. Councillor Young, are you content that aerial photograph's there? Thanks, John. And I think there's a clear indication from officers that the two settlements are separate. That's in the report. They're not linked, according to officers, in any way. So if there are no other questions, we will go into session. Thanks, Doug. So members, we're in session. We're in session anyway. I think Councillor Dryborough has proposed that we go with the officer's recommendation. It would appear that Councillor Maitland has supported that. Is that right, Jane?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
And we've got a proposal from Ivor Hislop to approve this application contrary to policy, and he's set out the reasons for that. I don't have a seconder yet for Councillor Hislop.
Second that, Chair.
Douglas Fairbairn, okay, that's fine, Doug. So it's a proposal, a motion by Councillor Dryborough, a second by Councillor Maitland to refuse this application, and an amendment by Councillor Hislop and seconded by Doug Fairbairn to approve this on the basis that it coalesces with adjoining properties. Is that right, Ivor?
It was that it's well related as it follows the sort of building of houses round about that junction on the road, which was shown on page 7 that Claire had put forward, that this was an acceptable sort of what you would look at as a small building group.
Okay, got Jane Maitland wanting to speak. Jane, please.
Chairman, I think we've got to remind members we're looking at site A, which is nowhere near the junction.
Yeah, well spotted, Jane. David Sutty, David, does that amendment fit? Is that an acceptable proposal by Councillor Hislop?
In respect of Site A, I'm afraid I would have to concur with Councillor Maitland there that Site A is physically separated from the junction, so it couldn't possibly be interpreted as complying with what's shown in the supplementary guidance.
Okay, in that case, Ivor, unless you can find a new form of words. Oh, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just for clarity, can the officers tell us which one was registered first? Because that should be the that would change my consideration. If Site B had been registered before Site A, how do we work out in what order they're taken here today?
If you look at your report, Andy, reference number 210151 is 9 and 21 0512 is 10. So clearly, agenda item 9 was submitted or lodged or verified first.
That's the clarification I was looking for, Jim, because as long as I'm assured we're actually taking them in the order they were. I appreciate that's what it says in the paper. I'm just wanting confirmation from the officers that site A came in before site B. Although it's which envelope you've probably opened, you know, I know it's difficult, but I think we just need to make sure that we've got them in the right order that they were actually presented. If I can get some clarification from officers on that.
I suppose we need to go to the back office, could have come at the same time, but David Sutty, you'll be probably best placed to advise Councillor Ferguson the sequential arrangement.
As far as I'm aware, I can go and find out if members want to know. They would have been registered on the same day, so it's getting into a little bit of academic hair splitting on this one. They were both submitted at the same time by the same agent.
And there's no point in trying to reconfigure the numbers so that Ivor Hislop's application or proposal can then be found to be acceptable. I mean, it is what it is. That's how it's presented. I've got Councillor McClelland, Henry.
Yeah, Chairs. I was inclined to withdraw my comment because Councillor Ferguson was actually picking up on it, and I do actually think it is a material difference to the decisions that we make today in terms of the order of the site A and B and how they were actually determined, and I would like clarity on that.
So are we saying that we should put the sites in an order that best supports a proposal to grant an application rather than the way they were brought forward by staff or plan officers or whatever? Is that what we're trying to say here? That we want to massage the...
Chair, could I come back on that?
Aye, Henry, of course you can.
I'm not looking to massage anything whatsoever. All I'm suggesting is that we are making, we've already, a councillor's already on here made the comment that site A is not attached to the crossroads. If this has been a decision made by officers to determine the sites as A and B as the manager, as the clearly displayed on the site plan we're looking at, I'm looking for clarity if that's been an officer decision or has that been an applicant's decision to refer the sites as A and B, and again the order that we're talking about, because it is a significant element in our decision making process.
The officer already told us they come in the same day. How they'd be allocated, I presume, would be a member of staff, but whether or not it would be a case officer, I don't know. I'll ask David Sutty to try and confirm that, but Archie Dryburgh wants to come in, Archie.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, the agenda for this application would have went through governance, and the governance would have made sure it was appropriate for this particular agenda item to be here. And you know, I'm a bit concerned that we're getting into agenda setting here as part of the Planning Applications Committee. This was here as item number whatever it is, and then the following one is as, and that would have went through governance to ensure the appropriate reporting regime.
Thanks, actually. David, in as much as you know, there wouldn't be any massaging by officers to make sure that A and B are presented in this way?
Chair, absolutely not. The applications, I'm trying to find out exactly when as we're speaking, they would have been pulled out of the e-planning system from the Scottish Government just in the order in which they came, and the reference number would be automated by the computer system. And they're both, I note, submitted on the 25th of January. So it's entirely arbitrary. They both came in at the same time.
David, can I add a point about the registration of the application? Yeah, sorry. It was the applicant that made them cite A. I mean, the applicant's agent, who is the same, made them cite A and cite B. When they were registered, we had to ask for some additional information with regards to site ownership on the shared lay-by. That was submitted by the applicant's agent at the same time. So that's how so it's just how the numbering came in. So the numbering came in. Site A was 151 and site B was 152.
Yes, Lara, if you can go back to slide 69, it actually shows that. It's marked by the agent as site A.
Yeah.
Clarification, there you go. It was done by the agent and allocated by the e-planning system before it came to us. So we'll continue. We're dealing with thanks, Henry. We're dealing with site A, and as David has pointed out, it is not adjacent to a road, a junction, or anything else. Therefore, Ivor's proposal as it stands falls.
Chair.
Yes.
If you are taking them both as one, it would be easier to do, because it would seem that if one passes the criteria, the second one would stand a chance as well. And it's just unfortunate they came in reverse order. So I think in relation to this one, taking into account all the information we have with this one and the next application, I think it relates well to the junction.
I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can tie two applications together. We have an application here for site A that we'll have to deter. I'll ask David Sutty's advice, so we've never brought forward other applications, cobbled them together and considered them as a single when they come in individually. It's a standard procedure that we deal with an application on its merits. We have an application, which is application number 9 for site A. David Sutty, can you give advice? Can we join these two applications together, consider them as one, or do we have a duty of care to ensure that we are consistent in what we do?
Chair can concur with your advice there that these have been submitted as two separate individual applications for an individual house in each case. Had it come forward as a single application for two houses and they were clustered around the junction, that's entirely fair for you to consider this. But if you look at the red line boundary that has been submitted for site A, it is physically separated from the access road to Redkirk. So it is on its own merits in isolation in that field as opposed to clustering around a junction.
Thanks, David. So we will consider agenda item number 9 on its own, Ivor, and you have a proposal and a seconder to support the officer's recommendation, unless you can come up with a form of words that allows members to consider site A, then we will go with the proposal that's already been placed before us today.
Chair, it would appear that I've been sort of hamstrung by the way the applications have come in, so I'll maybe have to withdraw it this time.
That's very generous of you, Ivor. Thanks very much. Okay, if there are no alternative proposals, there's a motion by Councillor Dryburgh, seconded by Councillor Maitland, to reject this application on the grounds set out by the case officer. Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members have agreed to refuse the application on the grounds detailed in the report.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item number 10. An application for the erection of a dwelling house and detached garage agricultural. Sorry, I'll start that again. Erection of dwelling house and detached garage and agricultural shed and installation of septic tank and soakaway, site B, and formation of shared lay-by access at land at Redkirk, south of Oakland, Gretna. The application types are planning permission in principle. Reference number is 21/0152/PIP. The recommendation is to refuse, and the case officer again is Claire Eckstein. Claire, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is the application site for Site B, which is obviously bounds onto the access road, which leads up to 2 Redkirk. Next one. And this shows the block plan of Site B, showing the site itself, obviously with Site A. Next. If you want to see all the slides again in the presentation, which I've just shown,
run quickly through them, Claire, please.
Right. Okay. Well, you'll have to go back up to the original one that I did for.
And just deal it specifically with Site B, though, please.
Right. Okay. If you just go back up one more for the aerial photograph, so you can see Site B there, or just to the south of Oakland and the access road that leads up to Redkirk, and you'll see that just to Oakland is on at the sort of junction, and then further along is the farm buildings, which you may recall I took the photograph across the southwest of the site. Okay, next, and that just shows the shared lay-by position. Next. So that shows Oakland, April Cottage, and the access points. Next. So obviously Site B is to the left, and you can see the farm buildings behind that, just above the lettering. Next. So this is just showing the junction with the farm buildings, Oakland, and Site B, which is on the corner hedge there. Next. And then it's just looking back up again from Oakland, up April Cottage, up to the rest of Redkirk. Next. And then this is me standing, the car's just parked beside the farm buildings on the access road up to 2 Redkirk. And it shows the field gate, which is approximately 15 metres to the east of the proposed boundary for Site B. Next. And been through that discussion. So so essentially there's very little difference between the justification and case given for this proposal and the previous one, but there's additional comments that have been raised by the contaminated land officer and the council archaeologist, and this relates to the identification of the former railway associated with the HMP Gretna Munitions Factory. And that used to run along the sort of northern boundary of the site. So there's some comments from them which relate purely to Site B, but the recommendation is slightly different from that given for Site A, and is set out in the report. Just me.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, members, again, questions for the case officer? There are none. Members were in session. Jane Maitland, please.
Sorry, Chairman, I was fiddling around with the mute. I just wanted to ask about the access. Whether there are any implications. I mean, it talks about a shared access, and we're obviously dealing with one particular site. Are there any implications there as far as access is concerned?
Do you want to respond to that? It's off on mute still. No. All right, sorry. Yeah, that was one of the reasons actually for the delay in the registration of the applications, because there was a shared access lay-by noted, so we had to ensure that each party, because it's obviously two separate individuals, were notified as owners. So each can be looked at separately, and the application site's boundaries reflect the inclusion of the shared lay-by access arrangement. So each could be looked at, could be determined individually, and roads raised no issues regarding the shared access lay-by arrangement.
Thanks, Claire. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I would move that we approve this on the grounds that I moved for the last one. This is well related to the junction, and that's a sort of form that we encourage or find acceptable. And I think it was page 7 of the supplementary guidance.
Thanks for that, Ivor. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, thanks very much here. And this one is a bit different because it does have that notice, and I do have a lot of sympathy for this one, and I would like to second Councillor Hislop on that one.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members otherwise minded? Bearing in mind it's a policy decision we're making here just a bit. If there are no members otherwise minded, Jane Maitland.
I have with what Councillors Dryborough and Hislop are saying with this one. Certainly, it's much more on an edge than previously, but it still doesn't comply with our policies. And you either comply with policies and fit everything around your policies, or you don't. And my instinct is to be fair to the public and make certain that they think that we are dealing fairly with them. You have to follow your policies. So I propose that we agree the recommendation.
Okay. I will second that proposal, and that will take us to a vote. Tracy, can you confirm the proposal and the amendment, please, and then go to the vote?
Thanks, Chair. So the motion is proposed by Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, and that's to approve the application. And is that it does comply with policy H3 of Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan, as it does relate in the supplementary guidance to housing in the countryside, and does enhance the character of a small building group, as this is well related to the junction and forms a cluster.
Yes.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
Yep.
And the amendment is proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Dempster, the Chair, and that is to refuse the application on the grounds as detailed in the report.
Thanks, Tracy.
Chair.
Amendment.
Vice Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Crothers. Motion, Ian.
You're breaking up, Ian. We can't hear you.
Sorry, Claire. Motion.
Motion, thanks. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
She's left the meeting, Chair, and Tracy.
Thanks. Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Tate.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Young.
Amendment.
No, the motion carries 10 votes to 8. The application has been approved.
Thank you, Tracy. Members, I know it's gone on, but this is the last agenda item, so if everybody's happy, we'll just move on and determine it, and that'll
Sorry,
allow you
Chair.
to go with the rest of your day.
Chair, important question. That last item was just to approve. I assume that's subject to the appropriate conditions being a planning permission in principle.
I take it members were satisfied and content with that, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Well done, Ivor. Okay, you're right, David. The normal way of doing business, yes. And sorry that wasn't made clear earlier. Okay. Ian Crowther has left the meeting, so this is the last agenda item for today. Plan application for the erection of 2 dwelling houses and installation of septic tank and soak away at Dew Vale, Annan Road, Dumfries. The application types are planning permission in principle. The reference number is 20/1807/PIP, and the recommendation is to refuse. And Case Officer Lindsay Cameron. Lindsay, good afternoon. Hope you're with us.
I am, Chair. Thank you.
Good stuff. Lindsay, just take us through your presentation, please.
I will do. Thank you. The first slide is location plan. It shows that the application is located on an area of land at Dewy Vale, which is a small building group located to the north of the A75, just beyond the eastern edge of Dumfries. Next slide, please. This is the block plan, which shows the layout of the small building group at Dewy Vale in more detail. The application site would be located between the former farm buildings at Dewy Vale, which are to the south, and the large detached dwelling house known as Highfields to the north. There are a number of other modern and traditional dwellings to the west, and as yet the underdeveloped housing plot at Plot 3 Cullen Farm, and to the east of the site are open fields. This plan also shows the indicative layout of the 2 plots, with Plot 2 sitting to the west behind Plot 1, which would be accessed by way of a private track to the south of Plot 1. Next slide, please. Moving on to the photographs, this first photo is a view as you approach the site from the south on the private access road which leads to the A75. The former farm buildings at Dewy Vale can be seen on the left, with the application site on the grassed area also to the left of the photograph, between the farm buildings and the dwelling of Highfields beyond. Next slide, please. This photograph looks northwest across the application site itself, which accommodates much of the grassed area in the centre of the photograph. Next slide, please. This photograph clearly defines the extent of the application site, which extends to the boundary with Highfields to the north and Edmiston to the west, but set back off the farm buildings at Dewy Vale by around 7 metres. Next slide, please. Moving closer to the boundary with Highfields, this photograph is taken looking back in a westerly direction across the site. Next photograph, please. This next few photographs work around the site, showing it in context of its surroundings. This first one is taken from the boundary with Highfields, looking south towards the farm buildings and the dwelling beyond at Dewy Vale. Next slide, please. This photograph looks east across the application site towards the open fields, which extends towards Cullen. Next slide, please. Moving around again, this photograph looks north towards Highfields, with Edmiston to the left of the photograph. Next slide, please. And this final photograph is taken from the adjacent field looking back towards the application site, with Highfields to the right and the farm buildings to the left. As summarised in the report, the application fails to comply with the terms of the development plan, and there are no material considerations to override the presumption in favour of a determination in accordance with the development plan, and therefore it's recommended the application be refused for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you, Lindsay. Questions for the case officer members? There are no questions, members on the session. Jim McComb? Oh, maybe you're just moving your mouse. Archie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think on this one, I would agree with the recommendations, Chair. Let's put that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I find it difficult to actually refuse this without actually seeing what's being proposed with the two houses. And I'm thinking back to our March meeting, whereby at Lag Hall down at Mavis Grove, because the first thing I thought of when I saw this was Lag Hall. And we agreed 2 buildings side by side, just about cheap by jowl, on a site about the same size as a neighbouring site. But the reason given was, if we actually looked at it from a certain angle, the 2 houses would read as one. Now, without actually having a design for the 2 houses, how do we know that they wouldn't sit well on that site? The site here is actually larger than the site at Lag Hall, which was slightly smaller than this one. And I think it's difficult to actually determine whether we should refuse this, because we don't know what the layout of those 2 houses would be and whether they would look well together or whether they wouldn't. I personally didn't like the one at Lag Hall, but officers were in favour of that proposal, and I think this one is of a similar situation whereby 2 houses might sit well in this site, and if there was further development, there's derelict buildings there, whether they were removed, it might actually open up future sites for further development in that area.
Thanks, Ivor. I think the officer's view is that it's one of the houses would be backland development, but I've got to Ronnie Tate. Ronnie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, I just, I think what Ivor has just highlighted there is relevant, really. And I would just like to take on the size of this site, actually. It's classed as a 0.2 hectare site, which is roughly about half an acre, which again is roughly about 2,000 square meters. And sorry, I'm getting interfered.
No, carry on.
And the normal size of a fairly large family house, Chair, is roughly about 350 square meters. So I don't just quite, correlate to the 4.9 in this paper that suggests, because we're putting 2 houses on the site, that these houses are going to be smaller. This is 2,000 square meters of land, and a normal house size, or a larger than normal house size, roughly covers about 350 square meters. So, it's difficult to comprehend the reasoning behind this.
David Sutty just sent up an image on the chat or the Teams, and you can see the layout planned or the plots as set out. And the planning officer is saying that plot 2 is simply backland development. There isn't an argument at this stage about the size, siting, or design or materials. It's simply, plot 2 is shown sitting to the west behind plot 1. So the officer's view is that it's backland development. Now, our policies don't support backland development because it's really an application in principle. And again, if this was right, we would then apply conditions to a control size, scale, whatever. But it's not the basis for the refusal. It's backland development. Councillor Lever, Jeff.
Thanks, Chair. I know in 1.6 the discussions with officers said they would support a single property on this site, and it was delayed in order to allow the applicant to submit information in support of their application, but no support information has been received to date. So I agree with the officers. This is backland development in whatever form we want to call it, and I'd second Councillor Driver.
I think we're still at questions for the case officer. I think Councillor Driver is offering a view, but we're in session. That's fact. Well, no, we're in session because there weren't any questions. Yeah. My apologies, Jeff. Yeah. It's getting late in the day. We are in
hungry,
session, so. It's just an age thing. So Councillor Driver has proposed that we refuse this, and you've seconded it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen. If there are no alternative views and supported with sound planning reasons, then we'll go with the recommendation. Ivor Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would move that we agree the application for 2 houses, subject to a suitable design and layout being brought forward by the applicant. Because if the actual houses are side by side, it can't be backland development side by side. So therefore, if they're facing, if one's behind the other, yes, but if one's beside the other, it can't be backland development because it's side by side. So I would move that we, at this stage, because we don't have the full plans, but we should delegate to officers to make sure that the proposed siting and dimensions of the house are actually appropriate for this site. So that's what I would move.
I don't know where you can orient a thing though when it's still one house behind the other, irrespective of what direction they're actually facing in. But I've got Jeff Lever and then Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks, Chair. I think not only are we in danger of making planning policies as we go along, but actually making up planning applications. We have to judge the application as being submitted to us.
Thanks, Jeff. Pauline Drysdale.
Thanks, Chair. I would be minded to second Ivor if that is allowed within the policy. Thanks, Chair.
I'll ask David Sutty. David, is this an acceptable approach? Because it's still, according to the way the plots are set out, not necessarily the orientation of the properties, backland development, and that's the crux of the matter. So, David, can you give advice, please, on whether or not that's a reasonable proposal on council policies?
Thank you, Chair. We have to look at the application that's before us. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of, say, a semi-detached property that looked like one property with the land running back from those, each with a road frontage, because as Councillor Tate's pointed out, it is quite a large site, but you also need to look at the context. And if you look at the overall size of many of the properties nearby, they are quite substantial. It is maybe not a standard street scene that way, but you have to look at the application as submitted. I've looked at the drawing, I've got it on my screen here, and I put a screen grab of it up. It isn't marked as for indicative purposes, which means that we have to consider the actual drawing, and the drawing that I've put there in the chat shows plot 1, plot 2 being a backland development with a tandem access running to it. So my view is that that application is what's before you. It may be that another application with a specific layout that showed how, for example, a semi-detached property on that area could work. But that's not what's actually before you, I'm afraid.
Okay, and then on that basis then, Ivor's proposal would not fit with council policy.
Sorry, was that a question from your statement?
It really was. You know, at the end of the day, it's up to I suppose up to me. But I'm really uncomfortable, as Jeff says, about us just making new policy on the hoof when we feel like it, or because we like some proposal that's being brought forward. There's a reason for council policy, and we shouldn't be deviating from it just to accommodate a view. There should be sound reasons why that. Jane Maitland? Oh, Jim McComb, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, do we actually have sufficient information to determine this application today?
Yes, because it's a plan application in principle. And additional information would come in due course. However, if we reject it today, the applicant has an opportunity to come back within a year with amended proposals, and that they might have enough detail as encourage members to support a proposal, although I don't say that won't happen now. But David City is quite clear. What we have before us is simply a plan application principle that sets out 2 plots. And these plots, one of them, according to planning officers, represents backland development unless information can be provided at a future date that sets out something different, such as a semi-detached approach or a layout. Jeff Lever, do you want to come back in?
Can I just say, Chair, I'm getting very uncomfortable with the direction this conversation's taking. You just leave it at that.
Yeah, okay. Right. So on the basis that, okay, we'll go to the vote. There's no point in being playing semantics. We have a proposal from Archie, seconded by Jane, and we have an amendment by Ivor, seconded by Pauline.
Chair, can I just clarify something, because there isn't an amendment, because there is nothing that says in the policy which the proposer of the amendment came forward with. It's on the application at the end of the day what we have before us. So therefore, I would suggest that the amendment isn't kosher.
Competent even.
That as well, aye.
Ivor, can you remind members what your proposal is?
Chair, I moved that the site was able to or could be able to actually accommodate 2 houses. Now, whether that be individual houses or whether it be a semi-detached, but that would still be 2 plots, and it would be left to officers to actually deem whether the proposals were suitable. Because if the houses were semi-detached, say, and they were lengthways, they'd be side by side, so they wouldn't be backland, they would be still in the same axis. Therefore, I think that's why we don't know what the layout is in there. Because of that, we could get an acceptable layout put in there, and therefore I think we should be approving this.
Okay, I have governance advice, that information not in front of members today to make a determination, so I'm not going to accept that either. And if the applicant wants to come back with a revised application and proposal, then we'll consider it at that time. So at this moment in time, we don't have a proposal that's competent, and I'm going to go. I understand, I've also been reminded that it was Archie Driver and Jeff Lever that were the proposal and seconder to refuse this application. So I don't have an alternative view. I'm going to go with the proposal that we go with the officer's recommendation, and the applicant have a further opportunity at a later date to revise or bring forward enough information as allow members to make an informed judgment on whether or no a revised application can be supported. Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members have agreed to refuse the application on the grounds as detailed in the report.
Thank you. Thank you, members. I have no further business for today. Thank you very much for your forbearance and attendance. I'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.